Langan from the National Parents Union. I'm proud son of Jim and Patty Langan and proud father of Matthew, Miles, David, Max, and Dylan. And I'm going to turn it over right now. As you can see, we have a double-packed show today. John, take it away.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. John Monteleone, proud father of Antonia and Rochelle Monteleone, and incredibly proud son of Lynette and Joseph Monteleone. Nice to see everybody, and can't wait to get this started today.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Jose Manuel Villarreal. I am the proud son of the late Jose Macario and my teenage mother, Maria Elena, down the hall. Sons, Noah, Manuel, and Nathan Macario. And rest in peace, Eddie Van Halen. That 20-minute solo and Beat It was epic.
Ooh, $1 million.
Hey, everyone.
Michael, take it.
Yep. Thankful to be the son of Vassie and Marshela Scott, proud father of Addison and Grayson. Good morning, everybody, or afternoon.
And before I turn over to our special guests to introduce themselves, we have three of the four members of 8 Black Hands here. We're always looking for different dad perspectives. Sharif, why don't you start us off?
Sure. Great to be here. Thank you. Thank you all. Proud son of Sharif El-Mekki and Hamid Khalid, and equally proud father of Adli. I got to use my fingers now. Adli, Ahmed, Fatima, Sakina, Zainab, and Zakia. 4 boys, 4 girls, 2 boys.
All right. See, I'm not so bad. That's me every week. Chris, how about you, man?
Chris Stewart. I am a proud member of the 8 Black Hands and also the leader of Bright Beam. I am the son of many, the father of many, and I will leave it at that.
Raymond Ankrum, superintendent, Riverhead Charter School, son of Paula Murphy, father of Ray Jr. and Michaela. She's gonna run downstairs because she's thinking that I'm calling her. Yeah, and I don't have as many fingers as Reef does, nor do I want them. Yeah, and so that's where we are.
I love how you did that, Ray. You called her name, and then it was like calling Alexa. You was like, "Oh, I hope." Oh, it was Alexa.
Yeah, you see him looking up at the ceiling. Did I just call her?
Hey, by the way, guest children are encouraged and not shunned away on the episode. Mine aren't here right now, but there's been plenty of times where they've climbed on my head during the show. So if it happens, it is what it is.
That's hilarious. My 6-year-old asked me, she's like, "Oh, you're getting on Zoom? Can I join?" I was like, "Nah, get out of here." Like that.
Hey, the pandemic has been real. So like working from home, I have a 3.5-year-old and a 2.5-year-old. I can do my best to lock doors and keep them away, but nah, they're gonna be heard and seen. So
yeah, absolutely.
But well, guys, we're so glad you're here. I've met you guys a couple of times. Most notably, you were at the National Parents Union convening in January. Sharif, you did an incredible Q&A with Ilyasa Shabazz at that time too. You really, huge part of what made that we got the National Parents Union kicked off on the right note. And we've been doing this show now.
Tim, before you go on with that, right? I want to call you out on something.
Stop it. I know what he's about to say. I know what he's about to say. I know what he's about to say already. Cut his mic. Cut his mic. Who's got the mic control?
Right?
Do it.
You gave this introduction, and it was.
Oh, here we go. Damn it. See.
You were like, and Chris Stewart in his beautiful black skin, and like all this other.
Bruh, see.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, yeah, listen, let me tell you something. And then when Reef came up, you was like, and Sharif in his afro. And then when me and Charles came up, you was like, oh, and Ray and Charles.
It was like Gladys Knight and the Pips, just the way it should be. Just the way it should be,
Ray,
bro.
I'm with you, brother. I never got complimented on my beautiful skin. We've been doing this show for months.
Mike Scott is like, I've been robbed.
Yeah.
Well, Ray, I'm so glad to have your beautiful bald head on today, and the best pair of pajamas we have ever had on the Dad to Dad show. Don't get jealous. Don't get jealous there, Mike, of the bald head.
Let me hear it.
But I'm just saying, next week, you need to upgrade your pajamas, Mike. Okay?
Yes. You need to get out of Idaho and get with the rest of the world, bro. Anyways, thank you for that detour, Ray. Appreciate it, man.
Every week, baby. So
Appreciate it,
guys,
so.
we were talking in the pre-show about just like the invisibility of dads in schools, right?
Yep.
And so let's dig in deep with that. Chris, you had a story, and you know, I want you to expand on that story so, you know, dads out there know that there are people that they can relate to and relate with.
You mean my story with the teacher, like in the hallway, talking in the hallway?
Yeah.
Well, listen, for me, this is like a story that could seem petty to others, but to me, it was important. I remember it, so I've told it multiple times. You know, when I go to school, so I'm 3 decades in as a dad now. So I became a dad in 1992. So basically, I've had kids in every decade. You know, like going through multiple decades in now. And I can remember not that long ago, I felt like I've been doing this long enough to where I'm almost kind of like a black belt. I'm a pro. I don't feel all like ashamed in the school like I used to with the first one and all that. But I had an interaction with one of my kids who needs a lot of love. And his teacher stopped me in the hallway. We were talking, and she asked me, she said, "So he didn't really go to daycare, did he?" And I was like, "No, he didn't. You know, he stayed home with my wife, right? You know," and I was like looking for the why. I was like, "Why would you ask me that? Like, he didn't really go to daycare." It just seemed like a weird question. And she kind of turned away and was watching other kids go in the door. And she flippantly just kind of said, "I can always tell the kids that don't go to daycare, go to a real daycare," something like that, she said. And she said, "He's kind of lethargic in the morning." And I remember that word just hit like a punch in the face, like, because you could call my kid a lot of things. And each thing you call my kid is going to tell me something. Like there are 30 million words, 300 million words or something. And which one you choose as a black man in a hallway talking to a white woman who's going to have my kid for the next 5-6 hours, right? And all of these things hit me at once. Like, number one, if I raise my voice, if I get mad, if I say anything cross or wrong, I'm a male, I'm black, I'm in a hallway of a school that's a very feminized space and blah, blah. And suddenly I'm going to be the problem after this chick just called my favorite kid, who I consider to be funny and comedic and hilarious and all these other words I could put in after she called him lethargic. And I swear to you, I promise you, I had to sit in my car in a parking lot and pull up the dictionary to see what that word meant, because I just really wanted to make sure I wasn't making too much of it. And when I pulled up the dictionary definition of the word, I was like, these chicks need to actually like learn a better language. They need to like figure out how they're going to talk to me. Now, what hit me as I drove away was, I'm male, I'm black, I'm in a hallway. I should be happy to be here. They should be happy to have me. If my wife had done this and had this interaction, she may have taken it totally different. She may have. But I was like lethargic. That one word could seem real petty, may not be a big deal, but how many other things are you doing if you're doing that? If you got my kid for the next 6 hours, I need you to see my kid as brilliant and bright and hilarious and creative and smart and gifted. These are all words I would prefer you use, right? But my biggest problem with all of that was, it hit me, what I wrote about that the next day was, she pressed my buttons on a lot of other issues for my own education years back. This is why I kind of hate schools in some ways. Like, she was pushing on all my buttons. I was smart and creative and gregarious in school and felt like I had my light diminished by many people just like her. And now here I am several decades in. She's triggering me after I feel like I'm an expert, not when I was brand new to this. If I had been brand new, if this had been my first child, we would have had a different situation in the hallway.
Yeah, that's amazing that you shed light on it. Tim, go ahead, man.
I was gonna flip over to Jose real quick, because Jose, you talk a lot about your background and how you bring your journey into schools and your own experience in education. Can you talk to us a little bit about that, and also to just being a dad too, and what Chris just said?
Yeah, you know, for me, it's interesting because, you know, I won't speak for all of the Latino Mexican culture. I'm Mexican, because Mexis can, by the way. And I'm also American because I'm born here. So you hear Chicano, Latinx, Latino. Right now I'm going to speak of a subculture, and I'll speak to this. The differences that I see, at least in my culture, is the maestro, which is myself, the principal, superintendent, no matter who it is at the level of a priest or pastor. So I've had to break that down just to get my dads to engage in school. Yesterday, I'm at a home visit, apartment complex, 4 deep, and I'm knocking on the door, little girl's failing everything. And I mean, they wanted me to come in and eat. I mean, come on in, maestro. It's full respect. Dad's quiet, letting me do my thing. But that's interesting because in any other culture, that ain't the case. So at least my experience in this San Diego County, Riverside County area of Southern California. So that's why it's hard to just, for me, I have to sift through my trauma. Because I remember being about 10 years old, my father, big Mexican man, who I saw wrangle snakes and chickens and all that, said to an American white teacher as I was translating, si no se porta bien, le pega. If he doesn't behave, you can hit him. And I'm translating. And this poor teacher who didn't know any Spanish all of a sudden was saying, no, senor, no, senor, no pegar, no pegar. Because he was given full authority. If he acts up, go right ahead. And that's when that stuck with me. And now I realize, doing research, really looking at the academic side of it, realizing that there is that level of respect in some or most of that particular subculture. So it's really interesting to talk about that now as a dad, because now as a dad, doctorate, master, don't matter. When it comes to my boys, I'm a mess. I'm a hot mess. I can't think straight, man. I think with my heart. You know, my little boys were going to daycare. I was saying, look, how do we get them to do carpet time? Dr. V, you know, no, tell me, because I am a hot mess, because it's all emotions for me.
That's great.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I've always found it, and you know, they used to raise to tease me about this particularly because I could get a whole auditorium full of other people's kids to, you know, to come together, to be quiet, to engage, that, you know, but my two little ones, they just like, yo, we ain't your student, we're your kid, and we run this show, you know, so it's it just ends up being, you know, very, very different. And to Chris's point, you know, like there's research out there that particularly Black children, they experience their teachers' racial biases as early as 3 and 4 years old. And I just, you know, when you think about that, a 3-year-old and what they internalize, what they hear, you know, forget the little bit that we hear from them about the experience, but, you know, there's this dynamic that, you know, this power dynamic where a lot of kids probably share just a percentage of what they actually experience in rooms with other adults, right? You know, schools in particular. Like they might give us a fraction when they feel like overwhelmed, when their glass is just overflowing. And I think that's part of the reason, like we just have to, you know, communicate and try to listen and see signs, but it's hard. And with that, we have to know the other side. We have to know that there's a potential for them to experience that racial biases so that our antennas are always up, you know, and that's just something that we have to, you know, recognize as fathers.
Scott, jump in here, baby.
Yeah. So as everyone was talking, I work out of this, if this and this, then this, as a call of action. So if we know that words matter, as Sharif just said, words matter as early as, so I go back to my 3.5 and 2.5-year-old. So we are conscious about the language that we speak around our children in our household because we want to lift them up, right? So even when they're acting left of center, we're still intentional with the words that we say. So the expectation is when they leave, I want to hold people accountable to speaking that same lifting language to my children. So I say, if we know that words matter, and we know that another's words can breathe into the heart, mind, and soul, then we must hold each other accountable. So I guess the question I want to pose to everyone is, what happens if we don't call out the bias that was just spoken of? You know, what's the you know, there's a harm, a systemic harm that just begins to perpetuate. So as dads, so once we do, we always try to give advice to dads. You enter into that space. How do you go about calling out that bias? If you are in that hallway, right, knowing that it's going to be perceived. What's the advice that you brothers have in regards for our fathers out there when they do encounter these experiences, knowing that words matter, and we must hold people accountable for not only how they speak to our children, but how they speak to all of the children, and then the residual effect of that. Because if you hear something like that, and I may not look like you, then I may think that that's okay. So I'm gonna throw that out there.
Starting with you, John. Let's go. Kick it off.
Well, I'm just listening to everybody speak, but I've shared this story before. So in my previous district, I was a superintendent, and I was overseeing a network. So I only had 6 campuses. So my first year, I said, you know what? I need to learn the community. I need to learn the schools. I need to know what the teachers are going through. So I strategically put an office in every one of the campuses so I could see the day in life of what the teachers were going through and just how the community interacted with the educators and this, that, and the other. So then year 2, throughout year 1, I'm meeting all these wonderful fathers, and I'm meeting all of these male role models in our students' lives, but I'm not seeing them in the building. And I can't figure out, why is this? So year 2, we start studying like, what are we doing that is preventing our dads from coming into the building? So, we did some research at a more cabinet level, but then we put out a survey, like, let's hear from our dads. And, there are a few comments as I was reading through them that I've shared with the dads before that stood out. I had a dad say, when I walk the hallways, I feel like a ghost. The teachers know all the moms' names, but they don't know my name. I had a dad put in a comment, I was going up to my son's room on the 2nd floor, and this white lady came up to me and told me that the kids were playing around in the bathroom. Like, either she thought I was like a sub custodian or a sub hallway monitor, So like, those are the things that you hear, and you're like, we need to change this. But like, to Mike's point, that action has to come from the people that work in the system that are or have historically kept Black males or any type of males out of the building. And it's something that we have to do as educators. And, I even had a dad put a comment, the only time the teacher calls me is when she, cause she knows that I will put my foot in my kid's butt. So she calls me when she's hit her point. And as a dad, I've experienced it. There was one time my daughter has been in 3 different districts. 2 of the districts, one I worked, the other district, I'm an active member in the church, so they know me. The 3rd district, however, the last district, I was rather new. And so, she was having a problem with her counselor. I said, look, I'm gonna take the day off. I'm gonna come on in and, we'll deal with this. So, I had the day off, and like most dads do, I tried to get that workout in. So I worked out before I went to the school, but I go into the school and I'm in my workout clothes, and for those of you that don't know, I have like arm sleeve tattoo, tattoos on my body. So I come in and I'm completely ignored by the office staff. Like, they don't even recognize that I'm there. Now, mind you, I'm an assistant superintendent in a neighboring district. So the superintendent walks into the office. He's like, John, how you doing? Shakes my hand, greets me. Then all of a sudden, the office staff changes and they roll out the red carpet. And now I'm somebody. Now they can see me. So, there's a lot to unpack there. But to Mike's point, I think it's us. If we're working in the system, we got to be the ones to engage our fathers and break the systemic portion of what we're doing that's regulating them to the sidelines.
So, the fortunate place for you in your life and in your career is that based off of your job, you're seen because people knew you, you were able to relate with the superintendent. But imagine all those people that answered your survey that don't have that ability to, be recognized or whatever as being, intricate parts of the community and members of the church and members of a cabinet or whatever. And like how those people are ghosts. So like what you're saying is relevant. Tim, what's your experience walking in schools, man?
Yeah, I got to tell you, so I'm not an administrator or an educator. I was thinking about what Michael said. What do we do if we hear that language or see that language? So working with the National Parents Union, Mass Parents United, this is really my first exposure to advocacy, the politics around school, how parents are treated. I grew up in a family. I remember sitting in front of the teachers talking to my parents, like, quite frankly, like they were idiots, and talking about me like I was an idiot, and they just sat there and they took it, because that's what you did back then. You didn't speak up to the teacher. Now, being in this role a couple of years, we talk a lot about parents who are in power, who can actually speak up. I think, first of all, what parents need are the knowledge that they have the right to engage, and that they have the right to actually speak up for their kids. And part of it might be getting through that trauma we always hear about. Because again, these are our kids. And that, my kid's 4th grade teacher, they're going to be done with Max and Dylan and the other 3 in a year. But like, I'm with them for life. And I have to stand up for them, and I have the right for that. But also now in my role, I try to tell other parents that as well. I live in a neighborhood that I grew up in since I was 11. It has changed over the years. The last 30 years, it's become very gentrified. So what you have now is you have a population that's largely forgotten, largely Brazilian, and then you have what we call the progressives in the area, the white liberal gentrified people who moved in, who they're all for school choice, they're all for better education, as long as it doesn't affect their kids. So it's if we're going to open up a charter school down the street, oh, whoa, that's going to hurt my kids. Let's shut that down. And that's not right. So, I mean, a lot of the work we do here is standing up for those populations. But I think, just to circle back, right, it's speaking up and having that knowledge. What we talked a lot about before, I've literally had to lunge across a table during a parent-teacher conference with my ex here, who works in the school system, and they're just talking to her because that's easy, and lunge across and be like, hi, I don't know what that means. What are you talking about? Yeah. Or, that's great, you think my kid is sweet and he's nice, but he's only hitting 7 out of 23 sounds. And I know he's sweet and nice, but that's not going to get him a job later in life.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, it sounds like he was being taught with Lucy Calkins' teachers college.
Wow.
Hey, Dr. V,
she's revisiting all her
I'm
techniques and stuff, by the way.
I'm messing. Hey, Dr. V, man. Hey, listen, there's a lot of deficit thinking when it comes down to like Latino parents and stuff.
Oh yeah.
So how do you address that in terms of building capacity and building agency for Latino parents?
Well, I mean, the reality is you got to coach them up. You got to teach them. I mean, look, when you get an A in Mexico, it's a 10. When you get a B, it's about a 7. When you get a C, it's about a 6. So right off the bat, there's a misalignment beyond the immigration, beyond the language, beyond the culture. And every time I hear, and I heard it a lot because I work in some neighborhoods that are preliminary white at sometimes in my career, when I hear that, the Latino parents don't care, and I gotta provide research, peer review to say, well, I don't know about that. Well, I don't know about that because my voice doesn't matter. So, okay, what about this? Well, what about this? And if you coach them up, then they'll have access. They'll know how to engage in this system that's very archaic in nature. So you have to do the work, and translating a newsletter ain't enough.
Yeah.
Having the robocall doing it in Spanish for you ain't enough. Having the cafecito ain't enough, man. You got to hold just quick forums. You got to try to get to them. You got to knock on those doors. You got to get to the community. My argument is we need to stop trying to get parents to the school, and we need to bring the school to the parents.
Absolutely.
And that's what we got to do.
I might
you got to
push back on that a little bit.
Go ahead.
Just a little. I mean, in this way, and this is the right forum to do it since this is a father's forum. And there was a word that Michael used in there, like accountability, like accountable, like what are we accountable to as the fathers, whatnot. First thing as fathers we're accountable to is the truth. And the truth is the fact that if you are a non-white child walking into schools in the United States, the schools already were not for you. They were already. So we could have a Black Fathers Forum. We could have an American Indian Fathers Forum. We could have a Latino Fathers Forum. We could keep going down the list of non-white identities as fathers. And our first accountability is to the truth of the fact that we are the warrior for our kids' learning and for their, because it's already, the deck is already stacked. Now, I would say this holds true for white parents too. I just don't think they know it as much because the schools are geared to them so much that a white father might just say, well, you know, it's generally okay, and go on autopilot even when it's not. So even in the suburbs, there's some learning problems that the white father's not paying attention to. But this word accountability leads me to three words that I talk about a lot that I think is important for us as fathers. The first one is your role. Do we really know what our role is? Like, what is the role? Do we have a good definition of what our role is? We can say father all we want, but what does that mean? What does the Bible or the Quran tell us about the role of the father? What does anything else? What does philosophy tell us? And then what does reality tell us? What's the role, you know? And if we were real firm on that, we could get to the second part is, now that I know my role, what's my responsibility? Because if I got a role, it's got to come with a set of responsibilities that I'm going to have to like fight fiercely for and do. And the last one, of my 3 R's of parenting fathers is, you know, what are my rights? Once I know what my role is, and once I know what my responsibility is, now I can fight you for my rights because I know all those background things. My friend Ian Rowe added a 4th R to me. He said,
yeah, Ian Rowe on this show.
Anyways, Ian said to me, Chris, you got to add, what do you say? Results. And I was like, okay, so I got to know my role, then I got to know my responsibility, my rights, and I have to get results. Okay, now that results part puts me on the hook.
Profound, Chris.
I didn't say it was profound. I didn't say, like, sometimes the most important things in life are not profound. Yeah. Like if you could do all this talk you want, if you're not getting results as a father, if you're not paying attention to results. When Tim says he's hitting 7 out of 24 or whatnot, that is the wrong result. Yeah. And my question, so when I had that problem with the teacher in the hallway and I walked away, I realized I wasn't as prepared in that hallway as I needed to be to know what my role was, and all those other R's, because I would have responded to her differently, more confidently, had I known all my R's.
You would have did another R, resist. You would have offered
reset,
some
resist. Yeah, I could have been bringing in as many. You just added a couple more. Reset and resist. You know, like I'm with it.
Reef, I'm
grateful. Hey, Reef, I'm coming right to you, Michael. Hey, Reef, I'm grateful for you for adding those two because he didn't have to quote the Ice Cube of education. All right.
Oh my goodness,
Michael.
Oh, just stop. You mean a father just like the rest of us trying to figure it out, who might differ religiously or, you know, some other philosophy, but at the end of the day, bruh, if you wanted to have a father's forum, you're going to have the spectrum. Absolutely. You're going to have everybody from Ian to Bill Cosby to me to people with lumberjack pajamas on Saturdays on Zoom. You know, you're gonna have to mix, bruh. Anyways, Michael, I want to hear what you got to say, Michael, because you prompted me.
Mike. Oh, you know what? I think I might want to sit back and just enjoy the show for a week. But no, going back to that, we're gonna go back to the hallway. I'm gonna live there for a minute because of the resistance piece. Sharif brought that up. Like, so earlier I was thinking about this sphere of influence. So if I feel as though I'm gonna be met with resistance in that space, I don't feel like I have control. So in the sphere, there's things that you can control, things that you can influence. And then when we feel as though we don't have control and we don't have influence, I think that's where frustration kicks in. So this network piece, so even going back to John, when he said, you know, those parents were reaching out via the survey, they were trying to increase their network. They didn't just say that just because. So we have this responsibility, as I think as a dad, to try to understand, like, all right, what's in my control? And then we've got to be, in my role, we've got to control that which we can control. And then, you know, what can I influence in my role as a father? How do I go about doing that? So I feel like I can influence my home. So I'm working there. I'm engaged in, obviously I'm an assistant superintendent. So I have some influence there. But how do you expand that network for things that are outside of your control? And then we start talking about policy and things of that nature. But I guess that's the piece too. I want us all to lean in. So as a dad, if I feel I don't have this control and I don't have this influence, how do I expand that network to get that?
Michael, so what you said, doesn't Michael, what you said, doesn't that underscore what Chris and Jose just said? So like Chris talked about, you know, how he felt or how people of color are already behind the ball when they walk into schools. And then you said, like, if you think you're going to walk into a space where you're not going to feel comfortable or there's going to be that resistance, doesn't that underscore what Jose said? Like, we need to go out to them then. It's like, that's our moral obligation to engage them and in their space initially to get them to come into that space, right?
I think it's twofold. I think as a community, though, when people are saying, I don't have control, and there are agencies in that community that may have some influence, then we need to knock down the school's door and go in and make the conversation uncomfortable when it needs to be uncomfortable. That's kind of where I was getting at. I believe it's both. Yeah, we as a school system need to do more for outreach. We need to, you know, try to engage in all different ways, but at the same time, that's not happening. So, you know, what do you do when that's not happening? We need to kick down the doors and say, hey, you know, if you're not going to come to us, if as individuals, people are feeling as though they don't have control and influence, well, here's what we're going to do collectively. And I guess that's why pieces, there's power in numbers.
Absolutely.
So,
can you imagine though?
What does that look like though? So as a dad though, so I'm going to ask everyone, you know, what does that look like? How do I get to that point where I can engage with others?
So here's the deal, right? I think that there's some shared responsibility, the shared responsibility piece that you mentioned, right? But then there's also, I feel like we let these schools off the hook, right? We let these schools off the hook with what they're supposed to do. We let them off the hook with their initial intentionality in terms of like engaging with parents. The research tells us that, you know, schools look at parent engagement through the lens of like the white middle class. We got to break that norm, right? And so when you mentioned earlier about schools putting in place outreach to go into the communities to meet with parents, to meet parents where they are. I mean, that's what we tell our students. Like, you got to meet parents, you got to meet students where they are and bring them to where you want them to be, right? There's no different with parents. You got to meet parents where they are. And so, you know, if we're looking at things through the lens of the white middle class, it's like, all right, well, this parent wasn't at this meeting, this parent wasn't at that meeting or whatever, so they don't care about their kids. That's bullshit, because these parents have to work 3 to 4 different jobs in order to love their kids and provide their kids with the bare essentials, right? And so you can't really talk about parent engagement without talking about that piece of how poverty and socioeconomic status may play into the role of why a parent can't be at a meeting that you want them to be at or that you think that they need to be at. And I think that COVID-19 has kind of allowed us to dream big, because now a person doesn't have to be in front of you in order for you to meet with them. You can Zoom meet with them, right? And like, everybody has smartphone capabilities and whatnot. So like, we are now forced to think outside of the box in terms of like how we engage parents. And I think that we need to do that. We can't go back into this old normal. We have to go into the new normal. That's my thoughts.
It's not going to happen.
And Raymond,
I'm going to capitalize. I don't believe none of y'all in education. I don't believe anybody on this line right now, any of y'all that work in education and have a school and talk all these great things. I don't know. I don't believe in you.
Look,
I don't believe in you
say,
for good reason.
Listen,
for good reason.
I was in 3 schools, you know, across 26 years. And often when people talk about like lack of parental engagement, I just feel blessed. And I've never experienced that. I've never experienced, you know, the lack of parental involvement in either of these 3 schools in 3 different neighborhoods, right? You know, and they were district school, and the last 11 was in charter school. Like, I mean, families were coming in. Most of the students were Black and with a few Latino parents. Fathers were coming in, you know, all the time. Like, I mean, it was, you know, just an interesting dynamic, because when you're raised in that as an educator, you think this is the norm. Like, this is what always happens. Then you would go to places and you sit next to somebody like, man, we had 6 parents come to report card conference. I'm like, what? Like, man, 6 parents come in the morning before 8 o'clock, before school even started, just to like, you know, so I think, you know, what Ray says, like the responsibility of a school to build an inviting culture, you know, so regardless if the parent had a negative experience as a child, they're still, you know, the champions of their children. And if their children is being respected and the community is being respected and they feel valued and respected as partners, as family, then they're going to come. And as John said, we also have to, or Jose said, we have to go to the community, right? Because that's also a sign of respect, right? My mom used to say, like, ain't nobody your friend if they don't come to your house and you go to theirs. You know, all they just come to me, come to me, come to me. And I never, that's just a sign of respect in a lot of cultures. Right. And so just this idea, like, I'm coming to you, even though you come to my school, I'm coming to visit you. I'm coming in your space of power, your power base, because we are partners in all of this. Right. And so I think, you know, and then back to the you know, just the fathers, you know, we talked about this yesterday on Freedom Fridays, like, you know, what Alice Walker said, like, you know, the most common way people give up their power is thinking that they don't have any. So we need the fathers out there to recognize, no, you have power, and your child is, you know, is worthy of you wielding your power when necessary.
All right, so
Chris,
real quick, before we jump in, Doc, real quick, I want to push these two jokers because last week I was extended an invite to Freedom Fridays, and then it was rescinded, and I want to put y'all on the spot right now.
You just don't answer.
I want y'all to invite me to Freedom Fridays right now.
See, this is right now. You just saw in action. Fathers watching and listening, you just saw in action. He was waiting for an invitation. He was waiting for a link. He was waiting for something to happen. He was waiting. He didn't know what his role was. He didn't know what his responsibilities were. He didn't know what his rights were. He didn't know how to get results. He didn't know how to resist in the situation and reset the situation. He just waited. And because he waited, the world brought him nothing. The world put nothing in his lap. And this is what I want to say about all this engagement talk and all this stuff about the schools with their schools. The schools are not going to do it, number one. And they could keep talking about it and having conferences and getting courageous conversations and reading all kinds of books over weekends and all kinds of book clubs and talking to each other on Zoom meetings. Parents, it's a trick. It is not going to happen. These are your children. God gave your children one warrior, right? In male form, and that's the father, and you have a role to play, and you have rights and responsibility, and you can wait for them to have all their equity weekends and have all their PD that they're going to do, and share all their stuff they're going to share with each other. And you can wait for all the acronyms to get together, you know, all the acronyms, the EDDs and the PhDs. But if you have KIDs, you need to actually take full control of a situation from day one. And let me finish this, like, one last thing I'll say about this. It's not that I don't want it to happen. I do want them to do better, to be engaged and enrolled and blah, blah, blah. But if you are a parent of a non-white child in the United States and you understand history, you should understand that there is one warrior for your children, like right now, and it's got to be you. And here's my best analogy. It would be great if gyms came knocking on your door every morning saying, you know, you haven't been exercising your muscles. We're here to help you exercise your muscles. We're going to pick up the weight with you, and we're going to help you pull it up and down and blah, 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 and whatnot. That's not going to happen, bruh. Your muscles are going to atrophy if you're waiting for that to happen.
I know, I'm waiting. That's all right.
Please jump in here to debunk.
Chris,
go ahead, Doc. Go ahead.
Two things, Chris. Hurt people. All right, Chris, that's for the side. But I'll also say this, that it's important to know, just like Shaquille O'Neal said, you're right, schools won't do it, but leaders like us will. So Google me, all right? That's number two. Number three.
I thought he said he
number
just
three
for the first time. Is that what he said?
And when I Google you, how many of you will I find? One.
Number three. That's all right.
One.
Remember what I said? Hurt people. That's okay, Chris. I hear you.
And hurt people understand how hurt happens.
I hear you, brother. I hear you.
Hurt people understand how to be empathetic to hurt people.
Dr. V, give him your Peloton app. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the third thing is, here's a strategy, Michael, to answer your question. You know, when I was at a high school, I was getting one parent, Latino parent, coming to the school, mostly affluent school. So all the stereotypes came out. I was getting that heat as an assistant principal. I took out an old school map, grabbed all those the mailing lists, right, from where they live, and then mapped it. I called the middle school on the other side of the freeway and said, hey, can I borrow your multipurpose room? Sure. First night, 3 months later, after I did it, after I got permission, went through the red tape, 50 parents showed up. So once again, you got to take it to them. And so just those real kind of things to just tweak. Now I just use Google, my maps on Google, And I use Route XL when I do my home visits, and it's all very available for you now to do that. So I think that's a tangible, when you think about parental engagement, it's a tangible to have. And again, I don't force my assistant principals to do it. I model it. And if they come behind me, great. If they don't, that's okay, because that's part of their journey. So that's, you just have to keep being that shepherd in these publics or charter schools.
But Doc, I understand where Chris is going with this. And the pushback to that, right, is that, you know, you'll have folks that are working in these communities that are scared as hell to be in these communities, right?
Sure.
And so therefore, you know, like, so my dean of students, right, is a rock star. Let me tell you, because like when we're having computer problems and stuff with kids at home, where kids aren't logging in, kids aren't doing what they need to do, it's his new job, like the new format of his job is to meet those kids where they are, meaning showing up to their houses, making sure that they get on. If a kid has been absent for a couple of days and whatnot, we're there to find out what's going on with that kid and stuff. Because if you look at some of these districts, there's nightmares. There's folks that have never logged on.
Yo, what's your dean's name? We got a vacancy at Mastery Charter School.
No, sir. No, sir.
See, this is what's gonna happen.
And you retired. He doesn't want to live in. He doesn't want to live in Philly with everything that's going on in Philly. So
you
Doc,
trying to say bad things that happen in Philly? See, y'all Republican jokers, boy. Y'all be talking slick out your necks, you know?
Hey, listen, I'm a Republican for Biden. Let me put that out there real quick for y'all trying to come at me. But yeah, Doc. So
we like to
hear
call
you.
that a Democrat, just so you know.
Hey, listen. Hey, I saw a tweet. I saw a tweet with Trump trying to recruit libertarians.
Yeah, it didn't work. It did. He needs to just stop. It's not going to work. It's not. We don't want him. It's like the libertarian delegation says no. We pass it on to the Green Party. Right? Keep going, bro.
Hey, but John, jump in here, man. You've been quiet for a little while. Let's go.
Nah, I'm like Mike. I'm just enjoying the show. I'm just enjoying the show. But Chris, no, I respect, and you know what? I honestly do agree with a lot of what you said. But like Jose, I think there are leaders like Jose and Michael and myself and Raymond that are out there beating the pavement, meeting these parents where they're at, letting them know that they don't have to be regulated to the sidelines. And we're also, we are doing all the acronyms with our staff. You know, we're giving them the PD and the fluff and the cultural competency. But, you know, all of that takes time. But we do have to do a better job of educating our teachers and letting them to your point, they have to know their role and they have to understand their responsibility. And that takes some time because, like you said, historically, because of the caste system that has been perpetuated through the United States, that is just not, it's harder said than, it's easier said than done. But putting leaders in the right space and in the right place so that as a father, people recognize me as a male and not as my title, because that's what happened to me when I was in that office. They didn't recognize my gender, they recognized my title. We have to own that as educators, and we have to do a better job.
And I don't want you or the doc to like hear this as a criticism specifically of what y'all do. I just want to say that there are 3 million teachers in the United States, majority of who are white women, right? I don't know what the breakdown of principals are and superintendents, but I do know the average school board member is a white Republican male who's wealthier than the district that he actually is lording over. That's the average school board member, right? So when I'm talking about from a parent level, we just need to take stock and be honest about the fact that the majority of us are not going to bump into one of you all, right? The majority of us aren't like, you all are a rare species. If you look at the big numbers, the law of big numbers, right? And in the law of large numbers, the probability is you have a better chance of being a responsible father who takes all the responsibility and accountability for the results and things going right than waiting for the system to correct itself, or the system to become less racist, or the system to become better, or the system to suddenly have teachers in the classrooms that know how to teach reading, or to suddenly blah, blah, blah. So we can complain about a lot of things. This is the one thing I don't want to happen. It's not going to go over well here, but I'm just going to say it. We cannot infantilize parents or fathers or men or people. We have to stop the infantilization. We have to stop the excuses. Yes, schools can do better. Teachers can do better. Classrooms can be better. All those things can be better. But if you are a predicting scientific person, you would say, I'm not predicting that that's coming soon, right? It's not happening soon. It's not going to come next Monday. It's not going to come 6 months from now. It's not going to happen in 2021 or 2022. So as a father and as a parent, every muscle that you have has to be exercised before you blame anybody else or anything else for anything. Because if you have any muscles that aren't being used right now, that's the problem. Let's start there.
Chris,
That's powerful. And I have one last thing to say.
Might
So
have to go 2 hours today, y'all. We might have to go 2 hours.
I love Michael's energy.
So to all the dads and to the parents that are out there listening, like, because everything that you said is true, Chris, but Raymond highlighted something too that we've learned about each other in this COVID times is that we can find different ways to be in each other's spaces and communicate. But what I've also realized, and I hope all the parents out there are listening, I hope we're listening as dads, is that they're capable of being much more engaged than they ever have been. Because when I walk into the classrooms in my building right now, and I see the teachers teaching via Zoom, I see parents that are co-teaching with them and are now partners in the education process with the teacher. And I'm not sure if our parents ever knew just how powerful and how motivating and how engaging that they could be in their child's life. And I hope that we don't lose that on the other side of this pandemic.
Hey, listen, that's a great point that you just made, because all of the peer-reviewed research states that a parent that is engaged, it increases the scholastic aptitude of the students. So
for many homes, though, what switched? We invaded homes because out of necessity. It wasn't as though like we invited as a school system people in. we didn't do that. So the engagement piece, I think, is there for those that can, right? Because we still have tons that are trying to work, and then we have these pods that are starting to develop. I was just talking to someone put that in my head yesterday. Like, yeah, you think you're stopping the spread right now by going remote, but out of necessity, parents are putting 5 to 8 kids into a space now to do this. So I think we're going into homes because of the pandemic, and in response to that, yeah, some people, if you come into my house, yeah, I'm going to pay attention to what's going on a little bit, right? But what comes next, though? So going back to that sphere. So now I've seen things firsthand as a parent. Is this okay? And that's where even as an educator, I'm looking in like, yeah, we're about to get exposed in a greater capacity. And how do we respond? And it's not a PD piece, because I held the hat as a PD director for years. And you can try to force skill into people. The will is where, and to me, I got an education because I didn't have great experiences. So I wanted to be a part. But for the majority of those that are working in education, they're in education because it worked for them, and they want to duplicate the practices that worked for them. So how do you change that will, right? How do you, or didn't, right? How do you change that will, though, for someone that's like, well, hey, this works. It's not on me. I don't have to change my practices. I don't have to change, it's the other factors. So I do love that point that, that people are hopping in and co-teaching, and I agree with that, John. We have seen it. But it's not as like we were just like, yeah, this is, from a school system, like, yeah, we want to invite you in. We forced ourselves in due to a pandemic, and there was no other means to do so.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and Michael, when you talk about that exposure, like I think it's really important for people to know that across the country, people were given, let's say, Black children, far inferior work. Like they did not honor the role as an educator and expose them, talk about any kind of level of being close to grade level. The kids were being taught, if they're in the 8th grade, they were being taught in 4th grade level. Right now, this is exposure. Like I don't. If that was going on for decades and generations, I don't see how Corona brought people to the light. And said that like now you're going to have rigorous education. Now you're going to expose students to quality and rigorous work. Like I don't see that. I don't see people just automatically you know, saying like, hey, let's use standards. You know, I still see educators out there, to hell with standards. We don't need standards. Just trust us and like, no, dog, I ain't trusting you. Are you crazy?
That's why your child needs a father. That's exactly why your child needs a father, because the educators, the people in charge are like, we don't need to measure nothing. We don't need no tests. All the tests tell us is how poor you are. How poor you are and how uneducated your parents are. That's all the tests tell us.
As a child, you only deserve the education that your parents can afford anyway in America. Like that's it. That's all
the tests tell us.
All
the tests tell us that you uneducated.
4 hours now.
Doc, jump in here, Doc. Jump in here.
Listen, man, you guys have me cracking up. This is good stuff. Chris, I know you don't intend any criticism, my brother. I appreciate you so much, and you guys are so genuine. You know, Ray, I did some time in a charter school, about 5 years, assistant sup. Really taught me some lessons. Also, kids who were incarcerated.
Did some time
because they hate
like jail.
Well, they hate us in California. They hated us in California. That's why. And it's like you feel so alienated here. It's really interesting here, at least Southern California. But, you know, working in the juvenile community schools as well as a senior director overseeing 70 programs, you know, we're not the majority in San Diego County Latinos, but we were the majority in the halls. And so that's really goes back to that systematic approach that we're all arguing here that needs to change, and we're all trying to make that change. But I'll tell you, though, I do have to give a shout out to Tim, though, because Tim and Marisol brought me to this group here and to do this work. And, you know, I see those curse-filled Facebook posts fighting the good fight that I can't do because I'll get fired doing that. But I appreciate him doing that for us. I just wanted to give a quick shout out to himself and Carrie and Marisol and all the hard work they're doing for our parents. Appreciate you.
Well, we're learning from you guys, you know, really. And I gotta give Chris some backup here, because you said something a while ago, Chris. You talked about responsibility and role as a father. And we talk a lot about that on this show. And I'll be honest with you, we call ourselves out a lot on this show too for things we didn't do. And I was brought up in a home where it was the mom that went to the parent-teacher conferences, and the mom cared about that stuff. So, you know, privilege aside, when I went into this parent-teacher conferences, especially because my kid's mom was a teacher, I'm not gonna lie, I sat back and I coasted. And I let them handle it. And then eventually, I think, partly because of this role, and partly because I started to hear some stuff, like you said, that just, it didn't match up with my kid. And I wasn't seeing the results I wanted. And I started to be like, these guys are just dead wrong. These guys are dead wrong, and this isn't working. And having a couple of kids on IEPs too, I was like, they're not getting the help that they need. And I can't stand for this because, you know, one thing we talk a lot about this show is that John brought up is, you know, we're going to look back on this pandemic or this time as a fatherhood and say, what did we do? Did we do everything we possibly could for our kids? And I don't want to look back and say, I just sat there with my tail between my legs and was happy that Max and Dylan and Matthew, Miles and David were sweet kids, you know, and that they're working a crappy job right now on the night shift because I didn't step up and call them out. So for me, and then I'll go around here, you know, part of my thing was getting the knowledge so that, a perfect example, when we went remote this year, and they tried to screw my kids out of special education services, I could say, oh, no, that's illegal. And that's something I couldn't have done 2 or 3 years ago because I didn't have that knowledge.
Tim, I think, though, you're hitting on something really important, though, about it's okay to have a different role than what people, like, just as long as you know what your role is. Like, my wife and I have an agreement. Like, she thinks I'm too harsh with school staff, so she does take care of a lot of the direct interactions and engagements, right? And I think it's to our benefit.
But that's the
well, you know,
you're still aware of it, though, Chris. You're still
I'm aware, but we're playing roles.
Yeah,
like we've decided together as a team. My role is A, and her role is B, and I like to have that specificity. I like to have that defined ahead of time, so I don't feel bad about the fact that I didn't get involved in something because I know it wasn't my role. Right now, she's the white woman whisperer. She's the one who's going to deal with that part about it, and she knows when to bring me into a game. Right? She knows when to say, like, listen, this is one for you, whatever. And then I know what my role is. When I get that look that like, this is one for you, I'm like, boom, let's do this, right? Like, but if I was getting involved in all the other stuff, it might not be productive. So it's good for us to have a relationship about like who does what in those things.
But at least
and
you
it's
had a role, because I was
what's that?
back. At least you had a role in it.
That's
Because
true.
I think unfortunately there's that stereotype of the mom goes to all the places, the dad doesn't. I don't think that's everyone, but I know that's the world I was living in. Ray, you've been the quietest one on this whole show, man.
There's no such thing.
You've done a
Never,
great
never
job.
has happened. Never's been said. Tim, don't even get him started.
Nope. He's been quiet because his pajamas are so loud. But go ahead, bro. What are you gonna say, Ray?
Man, and the great job you've done today. So I got a question for you, and then we'll go around as we close this show. Is we like to close this show with advice for dads. Okay, and so weekend's gonna be over. It's gonna be Monday pretty soon. If I'm a dad watching the show, what can I do to step, like Chris said, to assume my role as a father and be that warrior for my kids?
Man, so that's a really great question, kind of loaded. But if I'm giving any advice to a father, I'm saying cut out all the noise, all the outside noise, right? And connect with your kid, right? Make sure that you have a connection with your kid, even though there are going to be some obstacles that are going to be put in place that are beyond your control. And we can have 10 other shows on that, but do everything that's in your power to make sure that you're active and engaged in your kid's life. Don't pawn it off on anybody else. Don't take anybody else's word for what's going on with your kid. Make sure that you are having those conversations with your kids, and you're having those conversations with the educators that speak with your kids and teach your kids. So, if a teacher's like, hey, I just talked to mom about that, you're going to talk to me about it too, because I'm not taking any third person advice on what's going on with my kid. I want to hear from you directly.
That's beautiful, man. Michael Scott, how about you, man?
I'm writing down some words as everyone talks. So I guess my continuous advice is, grant yourself grace as a dad. Wherever you are right now is where you are, but now self-reflect. So give yourself that moment, self-reflect, and then act based upon that reflection. So, I think we talked a lot about, the control and being a warrior for your child and your kid. Self-reflect on what you've been doing and increase. Like, my dad always taught me, like, every day, the goal is to try to get better every single day. In our house, we acknowledge the fact that we are sinners every day. We repent in our house for those sins, but then we try to be better the next day, and we reflect on that practice. So that's the advice I would offer up to dads right now.
Yeah, I would say want to reinforce what Raymond said. This idea of communication has to be constant. You got to put that the introvert or whatever it is that holds you back, or just a assumption. Don't assume anything. Have those direct conversations with your child, with the mother of your child, or whoever else are the advocates, as well as the educators. And don't make yourself a second-class citizen. They're already going to try to do that in so many ways. Don't embrace that. Like, you are, as Chris said, you are your child's warrior. You're your child's advocate and champion and support system. And they should be able to stand on your shoulders as well as lean on your shoulders whenever they need to. But that can't happen without, the communication. And it's not a one way. It's not just you receiving. It's also you communicating your vision for your child to not only them, but also to the educators. Arm yourself with questions. And number one question is, how do you discipline children in this school? What is my child's reading level, right? And how do you all as adults in this school respond when you're frustrated, right? Like, how do you take, what do you do? What is your policy, and what is your personal, pedagogy? How does it, direct that? And then lastly, I would just say, don't believe the hype, to quote Public Enemy. These jokers out here will have you thinking that the black father is non-existent, that black children are fatherless and all this stuff. Don't listen to it, because I think over years people internalize messages, and then they start, succumbing to the weight of that message. You got to resist. That stuff is nonsense. It's false.
John, how about you, man?
So yeah, I mean, Sharif just gave me a great segue. So if I had 3 pieces of advice for fathers right now is one, like, if you're not an active participant in your child's education or in their life, you need to be. I mean, that is our role. That's part of, like Chris said, knowing your role. The second piece is, don't learn the hard way like I did and think or assume that just because you walk into a building that the staff will think that you are an active participant in your child's life. And then third, to Chris's point, if you see something that you know is not right, challenge the system and advocate for your child.
Thanks, man. Jose, how about you, brother?
Man, so many thoughts going through my head. I just would say, just a saying, I guess I go down, my dad, rest in peace, when he said in Spanish, el que no habla, Dios no lo oye. That one who doesn't speak, God doesn't hear you. So I think you just have to just speak up, and don't be afraid of hurting people's feelings. I think it's important that you as a dad, if you're tired and you're exhausted and you reach out once, reach out twice. I think sometimes we act like by leaving a voice message, that's the way we communicate, and maybe that's just not how it works. So you got to try to reach out multiple ways to people. And if you need to sit outside that school, sit outside that school. That's okay, because someone will come help you at the end of the day. So I just would say, just don't be discouraged. It's a grind, and it's a grind even for me as a father. With all the education I believe I have, at the end of the day, I'm still all heart for my sons. And I lose perspective. And I'm very, like Chris would say, aggressive in that way. We need to be, because I think it's important. But I gotta remember, I can't try to get fired here, So, but it's hard, I'll tell you, because it is a system that we got to just keep trying to change every day. So I appreciate everyone, though. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. I know you said a lot. To anything you want to close us out with, Chris?
I'm sorry. What did you say?
Any closing words, Chris?
Oh, well, first of all, thank you guys for having this forum.
Man.
This is important work. I just, the platform, the forum, the connections, the fellowship, all of that is so important. No matter how big or how small, this is where we win. This is how we win, like having these forums. So thank you, first of all, for that. And thank you for making us visible, right? Like every opportunity that you have to make us visible, you're doing a service to the world, like you're doing a service to the country, because right now we're not all visible. And that's a problem. We need to make ourselves visible. So my kind of closing words on this would be like, number one, when I say that thing about your role, realize that you're not born an expert in fathering, right? So commit to the fact that you're a student of fathering. Like you're a student of good fathering, which means you have to constantly be informing yourselves, having lessons like reading, and getting involved with other people who know something. When I told the story about being a father for 3 decades, my first one, I was a single father, which meant it was all on me. Like I had to learn a lot on my own. And the way that I learned a bunch of stuff was like connecting with other people who were more mature than I was in their journey, and asking them straight up questions, being vulnerable, saying like, how would you handle situation A and B? And what I figured out was they were surprised by that because no one does it. Like, and a lot of times I often would look at somebody who I thought was like the best father ever, and they'd be like, dude, I'm struggling too, just so you know. Like, it's cute that you think that I got all the answers and everything, but I'm just a fraction ahead of you. I learned that by reaching out, by asking questions of the people that I thought could help me. And I learned over decades, nothing through school and nothing through any formal situations of as much as what I learned from tapping into folks like you. Folks like you all, I would see someone like you, and I would pull you aside and be like, man, like the school is telling me this or whatever. And they'd be like, boom, 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 boom. And then all of a sudden it was like the Matrix where we started, like Neo in the Matrix, they download a program in the back of my head and suddenly I could fly a helicopter into that school the next day, right? Like
it always comes back to
the next day, I know Kung Fu. So anyways, thank you, brothers. Thank you all for doing something so meaningful and powerful. I appreciate y'all.
No, thanks for coming on, guys, and thanks for everyone who watched us. Again, I'm used to going to the park and bitching with all the other dads, and we can't do that anymore right now. So I come on here, but you know,
I knew you was gonna get one bomb in before the day was over.
Just
Yo,
one.
Hey, Max, say hi. This is
Hi,
who-
Max.
this is
Hi,
where our
Max.
kids, right?
What's up, Max?
Well, guys, all our viewers, thanks a lot. Have a great weekend. Thanks for spending some extra time with us, and see you later.
Appreciate you, brothers.
Take care, guys.
Appreciate all of you
right,
guys.
dads.
Thank you.
Dad power.
Wow, that was great.